4,500 years ago, without iron tools, without the wheel for transport in the way we'd use it, without a single machine. The ancient Egyptians stacked over 2 million blocks of stone, some weighing more than a car, into a structure so precise and so vast that it would remain the tallest building on Earth for nearly 4,000 years. And they aligned it to the points of the compass with an accuracy that still astonishes engineers today. The question isn't just how they did it, it's how they did it so well. This is the real engineering of ancient Egypt, and the truth is more impressive than any myth. Let's start with the big one, the Great Pyramid of Giza, built for the pharaoh Khufu around 2600 BC. The numbers are almost hard to believe. Over 2 million stone blocks, an average block weighing around 2.5 tons, and some of the granite slabs inside weighing many times that. A base so level that the difference from one corner to another is just a couple of centimeters across hundreds of feet. And the four sides aligned to true north, south, east and west to within a fraction of a degree. They did this in roughly 20 years, with copper tools, stone, rope, wood and human muscle. So the first thing we have to do is throw out the silliest explanations, because the real answer isn't aliens or lost magic. It's something far more remarkable: organization, mathematics, and an astonishing mastery of simple tools. The first great myth to bury is the image of whip-cracking overseers driving hordes of slaves. For a long time, that's how the world pictured it. But the archaeology tells a completely different story. Just beside the pyramids, archaeologists found the workers' town, where the builders lived, ate, and were cared for. We've found their bakeries and breweries, evidence of huge quantities of bread, beer, and meat, including prime cuts of cattle. These were not starving slaves. They were fed well on purpose. We've found their bones, showing healed injuries that had been medically treated. And most telling of all, we found their tombs, built with honor right in the shadow of the pyramids. Slaves are not buried with pride next to the kings they served. The pyramid builders were skilled, organized crews, a mix of permanent craftsmen and rotating teams of laborers, possibly working partly as a duty to the state, partly for pay and provisions. They organized themselves into named gangs with team names, almost like a sense of pride and competition. This wasn't a monument to cruelty, it was one of the greatest feats of project management in human history. So how do you actually move a 2.5-ton block when you don't have engines or even functional wheeled transport for that kind of weight? The answer is deceptively simple: sledges, ropes, ramps, and clever physics. The Egyptians dragged blocks on wooden sledges across the desert. And here's a beautiful detail: an ancient Egyptian wall painting actually shows a worker pouring water onto the sand in front of a sledge hauling a giant statue. For years, people thought this was just a ritual, but experiments have shown that wetting the sand just the right amount dramatically reduces the friction, making it far easier to drag a heavy load. They had figured out the physics of friction 4,000 years before we wrote the equations. To raise the blocks up the rising pyramid, they almost certainly used ramps of mud brick and rubble. Exactly what kind? A long straight ramp, a ramp spiraling around the outside, or even ramps built inside the pyramid itself, is still debated by Egyptologists today, and it may have been a combination. But the principle is the same: trade height for distance and let a large team haul each block up a gentle slope. And for the truly heavy stone, the granite for the inner chambers, they quarried it at Aswan, hundreds of miles to the south, and floated it down the Nile on barges. The river was their highway, and the yearly flood let them bring stone almost to the foot of the construction site. Their entire civilization was built around understanding and using that river. But moving stone is only half the genius. The other half is precision, and this is where the ancient Egyptians become genuinely breathtaking. To align the Great Pyramid almost perfectly to true north, they had no compass. They likely used the stars, tracking the rising and setting points of certain stars, or sighting the heavens to find the cardinal directions. To make the base dead level across such a vast area, they may have cut channels and used water, which always finds its own perfectly flat surface. Think about what that means. With nothing but ropes, plumb lines, set squares, the stars, and water, they achieved accuracy that we struggle to match even with modern instruments. Their tools were simple: Their understanding was not. This was a civilization with a deep, sophisticated command of geometry, astronomy, and engineering, applied at a scale no one had ever attempted before. And they didn't stop at pyramids. They carved single obelisks from solid granite, some weighing hundreds of tons, and raised them upright. At a quarry in Aswan, there's a colossal unfinished obelisk still lying in the bedrock, abandoned when it cracked, which would have weighed over 1,000 tons. They were attempting things that push the limits of what's possible with stone, and most of the time they succeeded. The pyramids aren't a mystery of magic or impossible knowledge. They're a monument to something more inspiring. What human beings can achieve with clear minds, simple tools, brilliant organization, and an almost unimaginable amount of patience and skill. Every block was placed by people, fed on bread and beer, organized into proud teams, using water and rope and the stars. That, in a way, is far more astonishing than any legend. If the genius of the ancient world amazes you, subscribe. Next time, we travel into the heart of Anatolia to meet a forgotten superpower that fought Egypt to a standstill and then vanished from human memory for 3,000 years. The Hittites.